Thank you for joining us again today for part 2 of our conversation with Dr. J. Warner Wallace. He's the author and founder of ColdCaseChristianity.com. We will jump in on that conversation as he begins to help us understand as parents how we need to answer hard questions. Let's listen in.
I don't know. Let me find out. I'll get back with you in a week. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
We can't know everything about everything. We can study, but eventually they're going to ask a question that we haven't studied for. And I want to turn it over to David now by setting up. First of all, I want to say, Jim, that the passage that Paul writes to Timothy always echoes in my mind. Watch your life and your doctrine closely, which means Paul didn't see there being a difference between what you believed being accurate and how you lived being godly. He saw the two interacting with one another. And I think we as a church too often see that, well, I'm a worship leader, so I don't care about apologetics, or I'm an apologetics teacher, so I don't care about, men's ministry or women's ministry. We have to break down those walls and start to realize that that's never how God, we are not bifurcated individuals that have these emotional and intellectual and volitional parts that are completely separate from one another. We are a human being that thinks and feels and decides, and we have to minister to people and disciple people accordingly. So our youth pastor for the middle school, who I volunteer under, Steve Strickland, has the research still has to come back with this, but I agree with him. The 75+% of people who walk away from the faith decided to walk away in middle school. They didn't say anything until they got to college because they didn't feel free to. So, David, I'd like to set that up for you. You're the one that's tasked with this daunting task of, prepare the parents and prepare the youth so that you can hand them to middle school and high school pastors so they don't walk away from the faith. So, David, why don't you interact with Jim a little bit?
So I do. I thank you so much, Dr. Wallace, for bringing this up, because my head just explodes when we start thinking about this kind of stuff and processing what this means practically in ministry to those of us who are working, not just as ministers, but as parents. And so my first question is this: how young do we start with this? Because you mentioned all the way down to 10 years old. You see that's where some of the evidence is going to. And what that tells me, as my daughter's in 5th grade and 10 years old, that we've got elementary kids making these decisions. And I'm like Steve, mentioning that kids begin to walk away in middle school. I think that's just because they have more freedom there, but I think intellectually, and I don't think they've been given enough information even going through elementary. But Dr. Wallace, I want you to talk about that and tell me what I need to know about that as somebody who's been working with children for a long time. And,
okay, so I would say that you're absolutely right. The statistics are pretty solid on this. It happens a lot earlier than you think it does. And we're talking about putting together these two things: strong relationships and good content, good truth claims we can make respond to their questions. Well, I think you'll know if you've raised kids, and my own all grown up, that you have much more relational equity and kind of stature with your young people when they're in junior high than you do when they're in high school. Because sometimes the most important voice in their ear in high school is a friend, is a coach at high school, is another pressing concern from all the stuff we put on kids in high school. But so I think we have a better chance of reaching them relationally the younger they are. And if that's the case, then it's a matter of you and I starting really young. And by the way, if you don't think, the reason why skepticism used to be that 85% of Christians became a Christian by the time they were 18, and only about 15% became a Christian after 18. That has dropped to about 12. And the reason why it's dropped is because of this. This is where I'm now seeing skepticism for the first time. It's not in some friend I met in college. It's the first time I've access to the internet. And that's really going to matter on how early do you allow your kids to have their own phone? Or if they've got friends, they're going to have a phone. There's no way to avoid this. So you need to start much earlier. When we started thinking about when to reach young people with these claims, we started writing children's books for 8 to 12. Because we knew that range of 8 to 12, upper elementary, junior high. Upper elementary really is all that is. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. That's a really powerful time. When your kids are in elementary school, before they even release, I remember as a youth pastor, some of the more difficult times my students would have, was in their junior high years, where you're first trying to figure out, who am I compared to all these other people? Am I the jock? Am I this? Am I that? I got all these ways I'm thinking of myself. Where do I fit in with all these other students? And I think that this happens earlier rather than later. So I think we should start super early. But here's the thing. I learned a long time ago that if you will make this visual, and if you're passionate about the subject matter, you can raise the bar so much higher than you think your students are capable of. So you might think, hey, my students, I cannot do college level work. If I'm going to teach them stuff from a book I wrote called God's Crime Scene, 8 pieces of evidence in the universe in cosmology, astrophysics, biology, microbiology, neurology, and philosophy that make the case for God's existence. Well, if I told them up front, I'm going to be teaching you cosmology today, everyone's going to leave, okay? Nobody wants to. But instead, I made it visual, and I did it by way of crime scene analysis. So I tried to use my strengths, right? And because I was excited about teaching, I hope that that was contagious. Mm-hmm. So I would say that you start early, you make it visual, you reflect the passion of what, and by the way, parents, sometimes we think, well, I have to have a whole nother category that I have to study. So when my kids ask this question, I'll be able to answer the question. No, that's not what I'm suggesting. By the way, when we wrote this book, we did not want to write a book that, number one, shows you all the things you've been doing wrong. And number two, gives you a bunch of stuff that you don't have time for now. So what we're saying, instead of, hey, we want you to add a bunch of stuff to your daily diet of things you got to think about as a parent, we want you to exchange things you've already been doing. Look, what you are passionate about, you pass on to your kids. If you're in a certain part of the world and you are a Panthers fan because that's just how you were raised there, right? Guess what? You probably passed on that contagious energy for the Panthers to your kids without even knowing about it, because you slip in the conversations. You watch, you turn the TV up when it's talking about the Panthers, right? Or how right now that team is being completely reformulated. There's a lot of talk and chatter out there about the Panthers. And you're catching all of that, and you're talking about it at the dinner table. It's not like you're thinking, I'm going to pass on an excitement for this team to my kids. No, you just can't help but do that because it's what you're interested in. And then that conversation comes out, just percolates to the top. It's like, if I don't know what's in this bottle, all I have to do is just nudge it, and I will find out what's in it. And so what's in most of us is an excitement for something other than the things of God. Let's be honest. We've got time. We're listening to podcasts. We're watching TV at night. We got stuff that we're doing as a hobby. Probably
David,
not studying the case for Christianity. And by the way, that you pass that passion on. I always say that one of the obstacles to passion is simply misplaced priorities. Mm-hmm. That's an obstacle. And if you won't remove it, you'll never. So I'm so geeked out about these topics that my kids would have to sit at the dinner table while a friend comes over or whatever. We're talking about these things the same way you might be talking to a friend about a team. And they would hear these conversations. And so they already caught this. I didn't have to say, hey, Sunday at 7, we're going to do a Bible study and we're going to cover this stuff. They've been listening to it all week because that's what I was interested in. So I talk about it all the time. That's the kind of thing we're trying to shift toward, right? Well, we say we love God, but do we love him this much?
Well, let me go back to something real quick you said earlier on that, because I agree with you. I completely understand the conversation piece of this is we've got to make it such a natural part of our day. But something you mentioned, and I think it's one of those objections that specifically dads have issues with getting into conversations because they're scared of not being able to answer it. And right. I don't want to miss the moment, what you said earlier, yes, to dads and to moms, to all of us. It's something that I said to my daughter. We started having conversations on the way to school because we have about a 20-minute drive. And I said, every morning, I want you to come up with the hardest question you can ask me about what you believe, or it can be anything, the hardest question. Yeah. And I want to just tell you right up front, if I don't know it, I'm going to say, I don't know it. By the time we drive home, though, I'm going to have you an answer. And so I tell our dads, it's okay, like you said, to say, I don't know, but will you reiterate that, and then also tell them where to give us some ideas where to go, where it's not always, hey, I got to go call my pastor right now.
No, that's right. So you're going to be in a position where you're not going to have an answer for everything. And you have to figure out what are the trusted sources you can go to get information. SES now provides content. You're looking for those websites that aren't simply like billboards or business cards, but are actually news information sources. They are constantly broadcasting information. And that's why I've tried to move all the organizations I work with toward providing content. Don't just be a bulletin board or a billboard, but provide content. SES is doing that. And I repost their stuff all the time. I try to do that 5 times a week. I post something, 3 videos, 1 podcast, 1 article every week. And I'm trying to do that. Crossexamine.org. Frank Turek, who's also a friend of ours and who graduated from SES, he's posting content daily. And you can kind of look through, right? But look, it's funny. You didn't have a hard time finding that trusted content when it came to your interest in news. You just surfed around until you found people you could trust. You didn't have that problem when it came down to sports. You surfed around until you found the shows that you think, I resonated with that show and I trust it. The problem is not that these sources aren't out there. It's that we're not looking for them because we are interested and distracted in other things. And what happens is your kids catch your distractions. If this starts to feel like this thing that's not even as important as the local sports team, then they're going to treat the rest of their lives like a thing that's not as important as the local sports team. They will catch from us our passion for this and our dedication to this. So I think it's not that's a burden that I know is on us. And let me tell you, I don't do that perfectly. Oh my gosh, I've got 4 kids. I've got a range of commitment. And if you've got 4 kids, you've got a range of commitment. Don't beat yourself up over this. But at least you want to say, I did what I could. And a lot of us, I think if we look back at it right now, we would say, well, I haven't even done what I could. So let's at least be able to say that, right? Because in the end, our kids are independent thinking human beings who have their own volition. And I want to honor that. And I don't expect them to robot out exactly the way I programmed them. I didn't program them. So the reality of it is all I can do is have some input along the way. Yeah. And so I want to be able for them to know that I actually respect young people. These are young people who are listening to this. This is the generation that's going to shape culture. I'm not going to shape culture. The next pop song that comes out that changes the way we think about culture is not going to be written by a 58-year-old guy. It's going to be written by some 13 or 15-year-old person who's going to become the next rising star, who's going to change the world. It turns out young people don't even realize that they're most influential right now. And with every passing year, they will be less culturally influential. You could change the world for good, but you'd have to know enough to change it. So I hope that kind of helps you guys think about how to approach young people. I want to give them power and empower them, but I want to start by being able to answer their questions. It turns out you could change the world as a non-believer, or you could change the world as a believer. It's up to us to decide which way we do it.
Awesome. David, if you have another way of phrasing this, what I want to ask Jim right now, First Baptist Church, Indian Trail. Mm-hmm. We are a Southern Baptist church in every way that means Southern Baptist, and I love it for that. So kind of think in that mindset. What is one thing, Jim, that you would want to say to that church in the way of encouragement, admonishment?
My dog is coming in here to join us, so he'll be
I love that.
Answer this question. Okay, so and this will be my parting shot to you, David, because I think that I want to just encourage you. But yeah, I think that we know, you know, and I know that as leaders, we have a responsibility. And our responsibility is to be able to answer the questions that young people ask, not just the way we want to answer it. So that's why I take a very classic evidential approach to my case making, because it turns out that most of the questions you're going to get from young people really fall in that category. Why is this true? Give me some reason to believe this. And it's not, I'm definitely going to spend some time showing them how the other worldview is deficient. But I also want to be able to make an affirmative case for why this worldview is superior. Why this worldview actually matches their evidential experience. We actually are evidence collectors, whether we like it or not. We go through the world, we use our eyes, our ears, we touch things, our empirical senses are collecting data. And all we're looking for is a way to explain this. So we have, first of all, we have all this evidence at the crime scene. And then we got to figure out, how do we explain that evidence to others, even to ourselves? So because we are evidence collectors, I have a tendency to want to be an evidence explainer when it comes to answering their questions, because most of them are really evidential. And there's lots of ways to do apologetics. And I feel like I paint from all colors on the palette. So every approach you might take to doing classical, evidential, presuppositional apologetics, I kind of put my paintbrush in different ones depending on what I'm trying to paint. But I will mostly stay in this category of answering the questions the way they're posing them. And what they're doing is collecting evidence and trying to explain it.
Loving people enough to meet them where they are. So thank you, Jim. Thank you so much for, I want to make sure that people know that coldcasechristianity.com, correct? Not .org.
Right.
It's .com.
Yep.
Go there, a wealth of resources. I can't recommend enough this book, so the next generation will know. Read it, study it. If you are at First Baptist Indian Trail, go to David Joyner, go to Steve Strickland, go to one of the youth pastors or pastors. If you care about your kids, about the next generation, then let's do something about it. Study apologetics, learn how to love, learn how to disciple. It's all part of the same process. There is not a difference. We want to thank everybody. FBCIT.org is First Baptist Church Indian Trail's website, scs.edu. Some of the resources that Jim just mentioned. Our app is totally free, and it has literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of the Apologetic Conference, the National Conference of Christian Apologetics. We have 10 years of talks uploaded for free to that app. That is literally hundreds of hours of the largest and longest running apologetics conference in Christendom, definitely in America and in Christendom. So Jim Wallace is a regular contributor to that. Several other, Gary Habermas, Josh McDowell, Lee Strobel. I mean, I can't even go through all the people that you can get on there for free. Please take advantage of that. There's so many resources out there that are free for you as parents and youth pastors and youth workers, that there really is no reason for us to not be equipped. scs.edu, FBCIT.org, First Baptist Indian Trail, and coldcasechristianity.com. Those are the three websites that you need to go to right now if you want to be equipped as a parent, a youth pastor, or someone who cares about the next generation. David, any last thoughts?
I just want to say thank you, Jim, for joining us today. And as I think through the statement in your book that caught my attention was that you as parents need to be the best apologist that your kid knows. And that launched us into this conversation. And so I just want to say thank you for your work. Thank you for your honesty and your passion about this. And it lights our fire, and we want to carry that on. And I thank you for being a resource for us here at the church. And we just want to say thanks.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you.
God bless, Jim.